Murphy's Law, Parkinson's Law, and Peter's Principle are known as the three great discoveries of Western culture in the 20th century. Murphy's Law is that if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Murphy's Law is if it's possible to be wrong, it will be wrong. According to Murphy's Law, it is an inherent weakness of human beings to be prone to making mistakes, and it is important to think thoroughly beforehand and to be able to take responsibility for and immediately respond to problems when they arise, rather than to cover them up. From the perspective of self-knowledge and economic management, the author introduces 68 psychological, management, laws and regulations that have a great impact on the work and life of modern people, such as the anchor effect, the Wallenda effect, the Hawthorne effect, and Locke's law. This book is a clever presentation of seemingly difficult laws and rules in a story, which is extremely helpful in understanding human nature and the underlying rules of society and business. The author of Murphy's Laws, Cheng Zhang, has compiled an encyclopedia of 68 different psychological laws. Number the anchor effect, independent thinking. In 1974, Hebrew University psychology professor Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky conducted an experiment. The experiment asked volunteers to estimate the percentage of seats held by African countries in the United Nations. First, they gave each group of volunteers a random percentage figure. Then, one by one, they suggested to the volunteers that the randomized number was larger or smaller than the true number. Finally, the volunteers were asked to estimate a real number. Interestingly, the volunteers' final estimates were all affected by the initial random number. For example, two groups of volunteers were given random numbers of 10% and 65%, and their final estimates were 25% and 45%, which were very close to the random numbers they were given at the beginning. The purpose of this experiment by Kahneman and Tversky is to verify the anchoring effect that they proposed before. The reason why it is called anchoring is that the anchor is buried deep in the consciousness, and many people do not even realize that they have been buried in the anchor, thinking that they have made decisions through independent thinking, but in fact, they have been misled by all kinds of preconceived information without realizing it. It is not easy to overcome the act now mentality. How to avoid or minimize the anchor effect and not to be influenced by preconceived ideas. Apart from completely ignoring all previous information and eliminating the hidden danger of act now, a more feasible way is to collect a large amount of information, analyze the problem comprehensively, and then make a rational judgment in order to minimize the impact of act now. Number Murphy's Law, the only way to avoid mistakes is to plan thoroughly. In 1949, Edward Murphy, an engineer at the U.S. Air Force Base at Edwards, was a member of the U.S. Air Force. Capt. Edward Murphy, an engineer at the U.S. Air Force Base at Edwards, was involved in an experiment to determine the limits of human tolerance for acceleration, the MX-981 rocket deceleration overload experiment. One of the experiments involved attaching 16 sensors to the support of a subject's seat. The sensors needed to be fitted with two wires that, if reversed, could not be read properly. Unbelievably, after the sensors were installed, Capt. Murphy discovered that all 16 sensors had been wired backwards without exception. Afterward, Captain Murphy admitted that he had not designed the sensors with the idea in mind that someone would reverse the wiring, and laughed to himself, saying, "If something can be handled the wrong way, then someone is bound to handle it the wrong way." This self-deprecating remark became Murphy's Law, the most famous psychological law of the 20th century. If it is possible for something to be handled in the wrong way, it is certain that someone will eventually handle it in the wrong way. In other words, if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. This may sound a bit pessimistic, but from a different perspective, Murphy's Law reminds us that we must be thorough and pay attention to the details of everything we do, not to be too self-righteous, or to take a chance or be lazy and perfunctory, but to think about all the possibilities for things to go wrong in order to effectively remove the potential pitfalls. The worst-case scenario will always happen, so at least we can make a well-prepared program in advance. This is Murphy's Law brings us the biggest revelation. Number the inception effect, not thinking is a way of thinking. There is an important principle in hydrostatics, the law of buoyancy. The process of its discovery is full of drama. Legend has it that Heron II of ancient Greece summoned Archimedes to determine if the pure gold crown was adulterated. After receiving this task, Archimedes pondered for days, but never found a suitable method. One day, he decided to stop his work and take a hot bath to relax. When he stepped into the tub, some of the water overflowed from the side of the tub. He also realized that the deeper he went into the water, the lighter his body became. He realized that he had solved the king's problem by calculating the amount of water that would be discharged by sinking his crown into the water, and made a great discovery about buoyancy. This dramatic process of Archimedes' discovery of the law of buoyancy was later summarized by psychologists as the incubation effect. The incubation effect tells us that not thinking is also a way of thinking. In fact, this psychological effect can be seen everywhere in our daily life. Whenever we encounter a bottleneck in our thinking or work, rather than continuing to sit in front of the work desk and ponder over our thoughts, we can pause for a while and do something else that does not require much brain power, that is, the so-called non-thinking, which can easily lead to a critical inspiration, which is known as the incubation effect. Psychologists believe that this brewing process is not to stop thinking, but to transfer the entire original thinking process into the subconscious level of consciousness, through the subconscious to the memory of the relevant information stored in the combination, so as to obtain a similar inspiration state of mind. The triggering factor for this state of mind is the resting process in the middle of the process. Therefore, when we are faced with a difficult problem, do not take the bull by the horns, and do not doubt your own ability, because very often, we are not unable to solve the problem, but into the rigid mindset cannot be extricated, then, may wish to put it aside, go to do something else, so that our brain to eliminate the original sense of tension, dredge up the rigidity of the previous thought process, but more to receive new ideas. Thoughts and ideas. Number the kick the cat effect, a chain reaction of bad emotions. The kick the cat effect is derived from an interesting fable. A knight was reprimanded by his lord at a dinner party. He returned to his estate in a rage and lost his temper with the butler, who didn't greet him in time. The steward was so angry that he went home and found a trivial excuse to scold his wife again. The wife, who was aggrieved, saw her son jumping up and down on the bed, and went up to him and slapped him. In the end, the boy got slapped for no reason, and was so upset that he kicked the cat that was rolling beside him. This kind of emotional transfer is very common in our lives, in the family, in life, in the workplace. We will encounter such a situation, easy to inadvertently, they will be outside the unpleasant, bring home to vent on the innocent family members. Bad moods can spread from one person to another like a virus, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, and the speed of transmission is sometimes faster than that of tangible viruses and bacteria. However, while bad emotions can be transmitted, they can also be managed. We are all links in the long chain of the kick the cat effect, and we are all intertwined with each other. The bad emotions of others can infect us through their facial expressions, their tone of voice, their gestures, and their actions, etc. In order to avoid such a situation, we have to learn how to deal with our own emotions in a timely manner, and relieve the emotions of others, so as to prevent such bad emotions from spreading, and to block the kick the cat effect. Number the involvement effect, run, don't let your life spin. In the late 1960s, American cultural anthropologist Clifford Geertz went on a field trip to Java, Indonesia. In the late 1960s, American cultural anthropologist Clifford Geertz traveled to the Indonesian island of Java to conduct fieldwork. Geertz delved into the farming life of the local people and studied the cultural status of the ethnic groups. He found that the local people had maintained the primitive agricultural pattern of plowing and burning with knives for thousands of years, and that their lifestyles and worldviews had remained the same as they had been thousands of years ago. In other words, they had been stuck in a simple, repetitive, and unimproved state of reincarnation day in and day out, year in and year out. After returning to the United States, Giles wrote a report on his findings and named this phenomenon involution. The root cause of the involution effect was a lack of motivation to innovate. Because the land on Java is so fertile and productive, and even with the production methods of thousands of years ago, the people have no desire or need to change their lives. This is also the case in our lives. People who are internalized are everywhere, they are satisfied with the status quo, intoxicated by the comfort of the present and do not think about making progress, and they live day by day in a complacent manner, preferring to remain stagnant rather than improve themselves, and live a life of inactivity. In order to avoid falling into the trap of the involution effect, the best way is not to stand still, and always compete with the best people. Only by being faster than others can we win in the future competition and avoid the involution effect. The mirror me effect. * Push the boundaries of your mind to recognize your true self. I donate $50 to a charity, and then I imagine, through the comments and translations of others, what they know and think of me as a person who is involved in charity, a person who is passionate and kind. Then I feel very happy about this recognition and evaluation, and I know myself better, believe that I am such a good person, and hold myself to this standard. This is the process of the formation of one's self-view. Each person's self-view is formed through interactions with others. 2. The mirror me shapes the real me. 3. Individuals are so related to society that they often need to be judged by others in society. It is only through the judgment of others in society that the individual can complete his or her perception of the self. Self-recognition. Even if one starts out pretending to be a good person, one becomes a good person in the end. Selfing bias. * I'm good and you're just lucky. A psychologist surveyed the self-perception of managerial-level executives working in a company and found that 90% of the executives rated their own accomplishments higher than those of their co-workers. 86% of them rated their own performance as higher than the actual average, and only 1% considered their own performance as lower than the average. People seldom accept the reality that they are not as good as others and try to change it. Most of them blame others. They find all kinds of excuses to absolve themselves. 2. When we process information about ourselves, we have an underlying bias that makes it easy to excuse our failures while accepting praise for our successes. 3. Selfing bias is a form of selfing bias. 3. Selfing bias is an * attribution error. People tend to take their own success for granted, and in order to blame others for their own failures, they have to be able to take the blame for their own failures. In teamwork, avoid selfing bias by being humble. Selfing bias focuses on the processing of self-relevant information. The anchor effect. The independent thinking of the sinking anchor effect. 2 salesmen are selling something. Whenever a customer orders, one of the salesmen will ask, "Would you like to add an omelette?" The ratio is basically 1:1. The other salesman asks, "Do you want to add an omelette?" When another salesperson asks, "Do you want to add 1 omelette or 2 omelettes?" at least 70% of customers will subconsciously answer 1 or 2 omelettes. At this point, at least 70% of the customers will consciously answer add 1 or 2, and only 30% of the customers ask for no addition. When we think about a problem, we will unconsciously accept a lot of information and form a mindset. 2. There are 2 ways to avoid anchoring. One is to completely ignore all previous information and eliminate the hidden dangers of anchoring, and the other is to collect a lot of information and analyze the problem comprehensively. The second is to collect a lot of information, analyze the problem comprehensively, and then make a rational judgment to minimize the impact of act now. Impulsive spending is often the result of other people anchoring your mindset. Change yourself, minimize. Enrich yourself, addition. The Valentine Effect. The more you care, the easier it is to lose. The famous American wire artist Wallenda, who had been known for his brilliant and steady performance without incident, finally decided to give one last wire walk as his farewell performance and then announced his retirement, but he failed. The reason for this was that although he had been successful in every previous performance, he had always thought of the wire walk itself, regardless of what it might entail. In his last performance, Wallenda was so eager to succeed that he couldn't focus on the event itself and suffered. One, stress can be divided into harmful stress and beneficial stress. 2. Overstimulation brings pressure that destroys the unconscious response capacity that has been developed over a long period of training. The Kuleshov Effect. The world in your eyes is actually the world in your heart. The Soviet director Kuleshov discovered a phenomenon in movies where he shot a static close-up of an actor without any expression, and then combined the exact same close-ups with small clips from other movies. The first close-up was immediately followed by a shot of a dish of soup on a table, the second combination was immediately followed by a shot of a dead woman lying in a coffin, and the third combination was immediately followed by a shot of a little girl playing with a comical toy, a bear. The result was that the audience was very appreciative of the artist's performance, pointing out that the actor was in deep thought when he was watching the soup, and had a sad expression when he was looking at the dead woman, and when he was watching the girl play, the actor even showed his relaxed and happy expression. When watching the girl play, the actor shows a very natural expression of relaxation and happiness, yet the actor has no expression at all. 1. Whether it is the design of a trademark or the selection of a trade name, an important indicator is the Kuleshov effect that can cause good associations in various cultural circles, causing emotional resonance. 2. Human beings are never purely rational, and a large number of emotional factors influence the outcome of our understanding of the world. The Wallenda Effect. The more you care, the easier it is to lose. Focus on process and ability, not on structure. The law of illusion control. Believe in intuition, but don't fetishize it. Control intuition and make rational decisions. The herd effect. Grasp the critical point between following the crowd and blindly following the crowd. Think independently and rationally. The Barnum effect. Plausible truths are useless. Be true to yourself and reject speciousness. Occam's razor. Cut off the side branches of all worries. Don't add to the body if you don't have to. The wild horse ending. Anger is a kind of self-destruction. Improve your tolerance to external stimuli and your ability to objectively evaluate external stimuli. Take the initiative to release anger. Hercules effect. Ignore hate and hate will ignore you. Treat hatred with tolerance and it will disappear naturally. Hawthorne effect. Let off steam, and you'll be able to go on your way. Don't take it out on others, don't hurt yourself. 3 ways to vent your emotions: raging behavior, talking, and crying. Acquired helplessness. There is no such thing as a desperate situation, only a desperate mindset. If you choose to succeed, you must learn to face failure. Only when you get out of your psychological comfort zone can you move towards success. The Carroll formula. Accept the worst, seek the best. The most important thing is to be prepared to accept the worst. The tone is to hold on to the past, but not to give up and embrace the future. Jonah. Fear not only failure, but also success. Dare to break through with the greatest courage. The flea effect. Don't easily set limits to your life. Have clear and long-term goals for the future. Locke's law. A reasonable goal is a suitable goal. Don't be ambitious and focus on the present. The Locke effect. Fill in your shortcomings or manage your strengths. Manage your organization to avoid shortcomings, and manage yourself to maximize your strengths and avoid weaknesses. Put limited time and energy in the most skillful areas. Choose what you love what you choose. The frog effect. Ignoring crisis is the real crisis. Stay aware of crisis and don't die of comfort. There are many other interesting psychological effects and laws in this book, and the research and reasoning in it actually exists in our daily lives. By reading this book, we can think about our own or other people's life patterns and mental cognition from another perspective. This book is composed of short stories, starting from the perspectives of self-perception and economic management. The author introduces 68 psychological, management, laws and regulations that have a great impact on the work and life of modern people, and skillfully presents the seemingly difficult laws and regulations in stories, which are extremely helpful for understanding human nature as well as the potential rules of society and business.